Welcome to the Collins Cove Park Neighborhood Resilient Together Collins Cove Park Workshop at the Carlton Elementary School. I'm Neil Duffy. I'm the Director of Sustainability and Resiliency for the City of Salem. Before we get started, I'm going to hand it over to our translators, especially for those who are joining us on Zoom, and they will provide instructions for anyone who wants to hear this meeting in Spanish.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Erika Pérez y vamos a estar interpretando simultáneamente del inglés al español. Ya está activada la interpretación en Zoom. Hay un pequeño globito en la parte de abajo. Hagan clic ahí si están usando su computadora y luego va a aparecer inglés y español y hagan clic en español y ya están listos para escuchar simultáneamente. Pero si están utilizando su teléfono inteligente, hay 3 puntitos. Presionen ahí y luego van a buscar interpretación de idiomas, luego escojan español y finalizado. Y con eso están listos. Hi everyone, my name is Erika Perez and we will be providing simultaneous interpretation with my colleague Mariola. And if you know anybody, just tell them the interpretation on Zoom is already active. They just have to press the little glove, tap there, choose Spanish, and you will be all set. If you're using your smartphone, there's 3 dots on the lower bottom. Right side, tap there, find language interpretation, choose Spanish, and done. Thank you.
So this meeting, if it hasn't occurred to people who are on Zoom, it is also in person. If you are on Zoom and you have questions, you can type them into the Q&A on Zoom, and we will read them here and answer them aloud as the meeting goes when we're taking questions. In terms of what we're talking about tonight, we're going to do an introduction of the project and the team, talk about the project and the work that's been going on in Collins Cove and the study that's been happening, including all of these details that you see on the screen, modeling the flood pathways, and most importantly, some of the concepts that the project team has developed to help mitigate the flooding that is occurring in the Collins Cove Park neighborhood. So briefly, this is our project team. Again, I'm Neil Duffy, the Director of Sustainability and Resiliency for the city. Christian team is a project manager in our department, also working on this project. We are partnering with Salem Sound Coast Watch, who is leading the outreach and engagement on the project, but doing a lot more than that and providing incredible help and support throughout. And then we have the team from AECOM, who are really our technical consultants and developing the concepts that you're going to hear about tonight. In addition to who you see on the screen, this project is funded from Massachusetts Coastal Zone Management, a state agency, Mass CZM. In addition to being funders, they also are an integral part of our project team. And so we appreciate their support throughout the project, and so they're certainly part of this. So very briefly, what is Resilient Together Collins Cove Park neighborhood? Resilient Together is the name of Salem's climate action plan. Salem and Beverly adopted a joint climate action plan in 2021, so a lot of the initiatives that come from the Sustainability and Resiliency Department or that are related to climate action in Salem have that moniker of Resilient Together. And so this is Resilient Together Collins Cove Park neighborhood. This is part of a 2-year grant funded by CZM, as I mentioned. We are wrapping up the first year of that 2-year grant. Prior to this work, there was another state-funded, through a different funding source, state-funded project looking at the whole area of Collins Cove and the Willows, so you may have some familiarity with that. And out of that project, Collins Cove Park neighborhood was one of a handful of areas that were identified as places that we should look at and focus and really investigate potential specific interventions that can be done to help mitigate the flooding. Before I hand it over to AECOM, I just want to mention these are what we're talking about tonight are potential concepts and alternatives that are being developed and discussed. They're certainly not anything that we are definitively pursuing right now, but that is, that's where we are in the process. And the idea is to get feedback on some of these concepts and alternatives. And over the coming year, we will continue to develop them and look for feedback on them. And with that, I think I will turn it over to Ellen Douglas with AECom.
I'm Ellen Douglas, Senior Project Manager at AECom, working on this project, and my colleagues here are Tyler and Matt, who have done a lot of the work on this project. So what we're doing today is a follow-on to a previous project that looked at the entire Collins Cove to Willows area, outlined in red. That was also funded by the Massachusetts Vulnerability Preparedness Program. And so out of the results that we got for this entire project, we found, as you can imagine, some areas that flood. If you go to that Resilient Together website, you'll see from that first project a really interesting video put together of the history of Collins Cove. A lot of the area around Collins Cove is filled, so it's no surprise then as sea level rises that the sea starts to reclaim some of that area. And so the main objectives of this study and following studies in the future, hopefully, is to look at how we can protect the communities from that flooding. So the area that we're looking at for this particular project, the Collins Cove Park Neighborhood Resiliency Project, is outlined in yellow. And that yellow area is essentially the area covered by the model, the stormwater model that Tyler will talk about a little later. But it also contains the neighborhoods and the areas that we've found to be flooding. One of the first things that we did in this project was to collect more information about the area. And one of the cool ways we were able to do that was to fly a drone over the park and over the area in order to get really high resolution information about how the topography changes over time. And the reason that we needed to do that is we needed to find where are the low spots where water first will start coming in as sea level rises. So this map shows an image of that high resolution terrain that we got from the drone. The green, the darker green, is the lowest areas, and then the brown is the higher areas. And so you can already see from the map that the dark green areas are going to be those areas where water will start encroaching and already does encroach during a storm. So part of this project then, once we collected data in this area, was to identify what we call flood pathways. So the areas, the locations where flood will start, that if we cut it off right away, that will prevent future flooding in a more extensive flooding. So we found 3 flood pathways in this area, one coming right into the park, and I'm sure that anybody that lives in this area will not be surprised by this. One flood pathway coming in through the park, one flood pathway coming in at the end of Connors Road, and one flood pathway coming in at the end of Osgood Road. And the reason we needed to identify those flood pathways was so that then we could look at options for blocking those flood pathways and preventing future flooding. This shows an example of flooding that comes in these pathways. And so you can see here at the end of Osgood, we've got flooding. Here coming up Connors Road up to East Collins, we've got flooding, and here pretty extensive flooding over the park. So that really gave us a good idea of within this neighborhood where we could focus our efforts in trying to prevent that flooding. And just to give you an idea of the kind of flooding that we're trying to prevent, the map on your left is current conditions, so what we call the 1% storm. And the 1% storm means a flooding due to a storm that we expect to happen 1% of the time in any given year. So a very rare event, but when it happens, it causes substantial flooding. And then in the future, as sea level increases, we expect that flooding to get worse. And so this on the right then is the image of flooding that could occur by later in the century, around 2070, the 1% storm occurring later in the century. So you can, as you can imagine, as the sea level goes up, it's able to reach farther in when the storms come in. And so we see much more extensive flooding. So that's the kind of flooding that we're trying to prevent and protect the neighborhood from. So out of our flooding analysis and the flood pathway analysis, we selected 3 locations that we wanted to come up with these conceptual or concept schematic kind of ideas of how we could prevent that flooding. One area is Collins Cove Park. Another area is this little pocket beach at the end of Connors Road. And then the third area is that flood pathway at the end of Osgood. And so what I'm going to show you now are just some concepts, some ideas. And these ideas are what we want to get your feedback on, what you think about these ideas. So at the top of each of these concepts, you'll see, if we don't do anything, no action, and you'll see something called MHW, that's mean higher water. So that's essentially the high tide level, where that is. And then the next line you'll see is the 1%, the current 1% storm level. And you'll see that most of the seawalls and the flood protections that we have right now are, protecting for the most part, except in extreme conditions, protecting against the current conditions. But by the end of the century, in a few decades, the sea level could cause the storms to be much, much higher than the current flood protections. And so that's why we want to develop concepts for preventing that. So one way that you'll see in each of these locations is to redesign the existing seawalls. Most of these areas have seawalls at different depths and of different types of construction. So one area, so this first slide is down at the south end of the park, and you can see an image down on the lower left of what that seawall looks like. So one concept is to redesign the seawall that already exists, and another concept is to add some sort of a natural barrier, like a berm on the bottom. This second location then is near the ball diamond. Same sort of thing. You can see the top shows what would happen if we don't do anything. In the middle, you see a redesign of the seawall, and the bottom placing some sort of a natural berm, a grassy berm, some sort of a natural feature to act as a barrier to prevent flooding. Same thing, a little bit farther up on the park, same thing. The seawall is a little bit higher there, but still, by the time we get later in the century, it's going to be overtopped. So redesign a seawall or put in a natural feature. Now we're up on the end, the little pocket beach at the end of Collins Road. And here we have another seawall that already gets, and this is probably no surprise to anybody, the seawall there already gets overtopped during a storm. And that's one of the areas that you see a lot of flooding. So what we're thinking, we could just redesign that seawall as we could do in Collins Park, or maybe there's a way to actually remake that area to give it more of a natural, more natural features, nourish the beach, add more sand to the beach so that the beach can be a protective feature, as well as maintaining access to the water. Same thing, this point is a little bit further, just beyond that little pocket beach. Same sort of thing, redesign the seawall that's there, or maybe come up with an innovative design that can incorporate both natural dune or a beach feature with the seawall itself. And then farther up by at the end of Osgood, again, a seawall is there. It's a little bit higher, so it's not going to be quite as overtopped, but when wave action is high, you'll get some overtopping there too. So redesigning the seawall, or again, nourishing the beach, adding sand, making a dune or something like that, some natural feature that can help prevent flooding. incorporated with the seawall. So those are the concepts that we're thinking about, and we're looking to get feedback from the public, those of you online and those of you in person. And we want to get your feedback on what you think would be useful and helpful and what you would like to see there. Now what I want to do is hand off the talking to Tyler, who is our modeler, and he'll talk about how we came up with some of these, well, another part of the design and how we came up with some of these flood scenarios. So Tyler, take it away.
As part of a previous study that was previously discussed, an H&H model was developed to evaluate vulnerability within the study area. The Collins Cove Park study area was identified as an area for further analysis by the H&H model. H&H stands for hydrologic, which is how flow moves over the ground surface. So think about stormwater falling on asphalt and it runs over the street. That's your hydrologic response. We can simulate that in the H&H model. And then the hydraulic response. That is how flow moves through catch basins, stormwater pipes, and manholes and outfalls. So the H&H model can take stormwater from that falls on the road and simulate it all the way into the catch basins, through the stormwater system, and into Collins Cove. So why should we build an H&H model? The H&H model is a really important tool that can be used to help identify areas that are vulnerable to stormwater and coastal flooding, both today and in the future. To develop an H&H model, this one in particular represents the stormwater system within the Collins Cove Park study area. That includes catch basins, pipes, outfalls, but it also represents the existing surface. The streets, the park itself, the existing topographic surface is represented in the model, and that allows us to accurately represent where flooding will occur, the extent and the total depth of flooding being predicted throughout different storm scenarios. Once the model is built and we've determined that it's reproducing existing flooding accurately, we can then use the model and apply it to simulate a range of storm events, both for present day and in the future. And those storm events can have a rainfall component, a coastal component, and both. The H&H model is a tool that allows us to model compound flooding, where a coastal flooding event that might occur at the same time as a precipitation event can happen at the same time, and we can evaluate what happens when something like that occurs. So the first step in this project was to refine the existing H&H model that was developed under the previous study. On the right-hand side of your screen in the image, the yellow pipes represent the stormwater system that was represented in the previous version of the model. The light blue rectangles shown on the screen are the stormwater system that we plan to, or had planned to, expand the H&H model to now represent. By doing this, we're able to identify more areas in the stormwater system that are susceptible to stormwater flooding. We also took the opportunity here to refine our representation of the catch basin inlet restrictions in the study area. And then we also enhanced our representation of the model's surface. Again, that represents the surface of the ground. We refined the representation of that in the model. As part of the model update, we were in the field this past February to collect information that refine and enhance how the H&H model represents the stormwater system in the study area as a whole. We collected manhole rim elevations. You can see that happening right in this image right here on the right-hand side of your screen. We collected stormwater pipe inverts, essentially how deep are those pipes in the ground. Looked at stormwater pipe sizes, and then we just took general observations in the study area. We also looked at the coastal infrastructure, and we gained information on the top of wall structures and everything like that. That all went into the H&H model. This is what the H&H model looks like now. As you can see, those areas that used to have those light blue rectangles on them are now included in the H&H model. The model updates include, as we talked about, expanding the stormwater system, incorporating the field collected data that I discussed on the previous slide, refined catch basin inlet capacity restriction, and then we redelineated stormwater subcatchments. Those are shown by all these light green shapes that you're seeing. That is how stormwater in the H&H model is represented, and it gets into the stormwater system. We also, as I've previously discussed, refined how the model represents 2D flooding on the surface. So again, that's the extent and the depth of flooding at certain locations in the system. Once the model is built, the next step is to assess how the model is reproducing existing flooding. So the study area experienced pretty severe flooding during the January 13th, 2024 storm event. The flooding from this storm event was primarily caused by a high tide with storm surge that overtopped the coastal infrastructure, but there was a precipitation aspect to this storm as well. And as I said before, that's what the H&H model allows us to do, evaluate that compound flooding. And once, the H&H model result is shown in the center of your screen. That two-dimensional mesh, how flooding is represented in the model, is shown by all those dark blue and light blue hexagons on the screen. The darker blue right here is on Beacon Street and East Collins. That darkest blue that you can see on the screen represents a flood depth of 2 to 2.5 feet, while this lighter blue, kind of in the park and on the outskirts of the model predicted flooding, represents 0.1 to 6 inches of flood depth. So the darker the shade of blue, the deeper the flooding. As we can see on the right-hand side of the screen, the H&H model was able to reproduce the experienced flooding in the study area pretty well. As I said, that January 13th storm event, the flooding that the study area experienced from that storm was primarily from the coastal infrastructure being overtopped by high tide and storm surge. But the H&H model is able to simulate flooding from large precipitation-based storm events. So in order to assess the model's ability to reproduce flooding from such a large rainfall event, we simulated a 5-year current day rainfall event. That 5-year event is, you can equate it to, you can expect to see a storm like this once every 5 years. It has a very high peak intensity, so you can equate it to a summer thunderstorm where it rains really hard and you can see flow moving down the streets. It might overwhelm the stormwater system and you see some surface flooding on the ground. The H&H model predicts flooding in this location primarily. That is again at the intersection of Beacon and Collins Street. Based on feedback and discussions that we've gotten from the city and talking with all of you, this seems to be an area that is susceptible to stormwater flooding. This sort of flooding can be caused by multiple things. It can be caused by undersized stormwater pipes, not enough catch basins in the street, meaning you can't get the water into the stormwater system. And the tide also plays a role. Think of the tide as holding back the stormwater from being able to discharge into the cove. If you're holding it back, it doesn't have a place to go, and it ponds on the street. So based on these two slides that I've shown you, we believe that the H&H model is representing existing flooding well. And when that's the case, we can take the H&H model and run various projected scenarios to evaluate where flooding may occur in the future as climate change, sea level rise, precipitation-based storm events all start to intensify as we move forward. So a total of 12 model simulations were done to assess the study area's vulnerability to coastal and rainfall storm events. The H&H model identified undersized pipes, catch basin inlet restrictions, and it also confirmed the flood pathways from the coastal storm events that was previously discussed. On the next two slides, we're going to be showing you a sample of these simulations that were done. Those two storm events are going to be the 2070 5-year rainfall event under mean low water, so essentially a low tide condition, and then the 2070 5-year rainfall storm again, so the same rainfall, but this time under mean high water, being a high tide. So this is the first storm. This is the 2070 5-year rainfall event at low tide. As you can see, that same area that I was discussing a couple of slides ago, Beacon and Collins Street, are still susceptible to flooding here. This assumes that no stormwater interventions have been done. This is a projected 2070 storm event under current stormwater and coastal infrastructure conditions. So within the study area, a total of 3.5 acres are predicted to be flooded from this particular storm event, with a maximum flood depth of 1 to 1.5 feet. That same precipitation event, the 2075 year, but this time under high tide, you can see what I was talking about before, where that stormwater gets into the stormwater system, but it doesn't have anywhere to go. It can't discharge into the cove because it's up against a high tide. So that leads to more surface flooding. You can see all around here. Our total flooded area within the study area goes up to 7.5 acres, an increase of 4 acres just based on the tide. And our maximum flood depth now goes up to 1.5 to 2 feet in the intersection of Beacon and Collins Street. Some stormwater intervention alternatives that we're able to simulate using the H&H model are increasing pipe sizes, get the water out faster, increasing the catch basin inlet capacity, basically installing more catch basins within the study area to get the water into the stormwater system, providing additional flow paths. That's a little sneak peek. That's what we're showing down here on the bottom. And then two possible storage options are floodable parks, basically surface level storage, and then subsurface storage. Shown on this slide in the upper right, similar to the section views that were being shown in the previous section. This is if we don't do anything. This intersection right here is represented on the left-hand side of your screen in the upper portion of that white box as the intersection of Barton and Collins Street, which the H&H model currently predicts is susceptible to stormwater flooding. And you can see that by some surface level flooding shown on the section view here. However, the stormwater outfall at the southern end of Collins Cove Park is shown in the H&H model to have available capacity during these storm events. So one possible stormwater alternative is to install a pipe shown by this pink arrow down here from the intersection of Barton and Collins Street to the catch basin and stormwater outfall that have available capacity. That section view is shown in the lower portion of your screen by the pink pipe going from the left-hand side of your screen over to the right-hand side. What this aims to do is provide the stormwater a secondary pathway to get to the cove before it floods the street. Stormwater intervention is really a result of the coastal infrastructure that could be done to prevent coastal flooding. The stormwater flooding and the coastal flooding can be viewed as independent of each other, but it's not really appropriate to do that because as we can see right now, the existing stormwater that falls on Connors Road gets discharged through the cove, through a scupper right here. There's no stormwater infrastructure on the street. If we did do a coastal alternative, such as raising this seawall, and we did not do any sort of stormwater interventions, the stormwater wouldn't have anywhere to go, and it would pond on the street, and it would just sit there until it evaporated away. So when we look at coastal alternatives, we also have to look at what's going on behind the wall from a stormwater perspective, and that's exactly what we're able to do in the H&H model. So our first option here is to install a scupper in that redesigned seawall, but that scupper, unlike the scupper that's out there right now, would have a form of backflow prevention on it to prevent future high tides and future storm surges from backing up through the scupper. The second alternative is to raise the wall and then install two stormwater catch basins shown on either side of Connors Road in the image on the left, a stormwater pipe that conveys the stormwater flow south on Connors Road into the existing Collins Cove Park stormwater outfall. And that's it for me. Now I'm going to hand it off to Salem Sound Coast Watch to talk about community engagement.
So Salem Sound Coast Watch, along with the City of Salem, Christian and Neil and Christian, and Tyler has come to some of the events as well, have been really trying to engage the people in the neighborhood, and we've done it in multiple ways. We first interviewed people on Zoom, on phone calls, to find out what they were experiencing. We created a flood survey, which we then went door to door and put it on, this is a door hanger, which explained the project, and then there's a QR code that directed people to the survey. The survey is still on the public input page that is for this project for the City of Salem, and we are encouraging people still to take it as this project continues for the next year. We still are looking for information. If you have photos or information about past storms, we're hoping we don't get any major storms, but if that does happen, if we do get a major thunderstorm, we don't have information about thunderstorms. So this summer, if that happens, that would be a great thing to report through this QR code in this survey. And then we've also had several meetups at Collins Cove. This winter wasn't the ideal temperature, but we had people who came out in the rain, both times I think it was raining that we had it. We met under the gazebo, and each time people shared their experiences with flooding or storms, which is really important for us as we develop solutions. We will continue doing that in the year 2, so please stay tuned and stay involved in this project. We will be redeveloping the community engagement plan. So we did our first year, and now we'll look at where we are and see if we can come up with new ways to engage the community. So again, if you have ideas, suggestions for us, please reach out to Salem Sound at, the easiest way to reach us would be probably info@salemsound.org. And then we want to continue meeting with residents to gather feedback, particularly as we develop these potential solutions to mitigate the storm. And what are the next steps? We will be finalizing the concepts that you heard today. With feedback, we will have other public meetings. We will continue to do meetups in the park and in the neighborhood. And the conceptual design work will begin drafting ideas. And again, we'll continue the community engagement. So thank you for participating here and in the future and on Zoom. And we will take any questions. So it's much easier to give information and share your ideas in person. So please let us know. We will communicate through the public input page, which is right here. The way I get there is I type in Salem Public Input. They all pop up, and you can choose what project the city is doing. And there we will be announcing through the city's city's newsletter and Facebook and social media. Salem Sound Coast Watch's social media will be introducing where and when we'll be having the next public in-person meeting outside, maybe when you walk your dog or something. So thank you.
There's
One more question? Great.
Asking about the existing sandbags that are along Connors Road, and the question is two-part. One is, is there a plan to remove those sandbags? And the second is, are those around the same height as what a redesigned seawall would be? And so the answer to the first is, the plan is for them to be removed. The city is in a place where it hasn't, I think, ever been, where both of the front end loaders that the city owns are being repaired. So neither of them are functioning currently. And so we can't, our Department of Public Services can't remove them right now, but as soon as one of those front end loaders is functioning, then those sandbags will be removed. As to the height, I think those are about 3 feet high.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the existing ground at that location is around 8 to 9 feet, so that would put the top of the sandbags at around 12 feet, NAVD 88, which is close to the elevation that we would be designing to, but a little bit lower.
Just add, I think, I can't remember if it was mentioned, but on that particular area, if we are redesigning a wall or whatever is happening there, we will want to explore access to the beach from the neighborhood, because we know that's an important part of that area. So we will need to think about how that might work if there's a permanent higher wall there.
And while you're saying that, that just made me think about the berm concept. So we know that the softball, Little League, the baseball diamond is very important to the community, so we will be reaching out to the people who use the diamond to understand how the berm would impact that, or whether it could be rearranged and actually make it better. So those are all the kinds of ideas we have to explore in this following year.
Okay, so the question is there a timeline on when a decision for the mitigation strategy will be taken? And so the plan for this project, for this 2-year project, which will end next year around this time, is that we will have that preferred option, and a preferred option may be a couple of different interventions. We'll have that preferred option and we'll have decided on that, and it'll be at about a 20 to 30% design at that point. And then the idea from there would be we could take that preferred option and move all of it or some of it to 100% design and permitting, hopefully over the next year or so. But that's where we are, but we really need feedback from people to make sure the decisions we're making in the preferred option that we're deciding on is one that is also one that's supported by the people in the neighborhood. So if there aren't, with no more questions, as Barbara said, we encourage people to please reach out and connect with the city's sustainability department or Salem Sound Coast Watch about this. Go to the public input site and please share this project. A video of this presentation will be posted very quickly on the public input site, so people can watch this presentation and get the information, and please share it with your friends and neighbors who may be interested so we can get as much feedback as possible. And with that, I think we will wrap up the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.